Welcome to Seismic Waves. For this video, make sure that you have your science notebook with you, and you should already have your Seismic Waves input page attached on page 35 already. You also need a pen or a pencil. If you're listening to this without the volume on, make sure you turn up the volume because I'm going to say a lot of things that you need to hear in order to understand. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and set up your notes right now. The title is Seismic Waves. That should be at the top of page 35. And you can also set up your table of contents as well. You can just put today's date. Underneath your title, don't forget to put your learning objective. Our learning objective today is the student will be able to describe characteristics of seismic waves. So in class on Monday, you learned that earthquakes create seismic waves. So seismic waves tend to radiate outward away from the earthquake. And I think of this as a drop of water. So a drop of water or anything that you plop into a pool of water, a pond, a lake, a stream, whatever. As soon as you drop that rock, for example, into the lake or the pond, then you get these little ripples that kind of ripple outward from that center point. And that's kind of what happens with an earthquake. For an earthquake, earthquakes usually take place deep underground along a fault line. And when you have the earthquake take place, the seismic waves radiate outwards away from that center point where the earthquake took place. And scientists tend to study these waves usually for a couple of reasons. They're interested in where do they go? So, for example, do they just radiate out for a little ways and then they stop? Do they continue to radiate through the entire Earth? Do they leave the Earth and go up into the atmosphere? Like, where are these things going? And then the other thing they're interested in, can they travel through anything? Can they go through solids? Can they go through liquids? Can they go through gases? And this is actually how scientists learned about what is going on inside of the Earth's interior. So this is how they learned that the mantle is a solid. This is how they learned that the outer core is a liquid. This is how they learned that the inner core is a solid. So before we talk about that, let's just kind of get the basics down about what these seismic waves are, okay? So seismic waves, we said, are created by earthquakes, right? And surface waves are waves that travel on top of the earth. So there are actually two different types of waves. We have these surface waves, right? And then we also have body waves. You can see that on your input page, right? So surface waves, these are the things that, for example, in the picture here on the right-hand side of the slide, if the earthquake takes place right here, I'll abbreviate it EQ for earthquake, then those waves that are surface waves, they're going to travel on the surface of the earth. Right, so this is like a cross section of the earth, like you slice through the earth. And now the top part here would be the surface, and they're going to travel quite a ways, right? But not too far away from the earthquake, because eventually they're going to run out of energy, and they're not going to be affecting people and houses and land farther away from it. And that's really what they do. They're the ones that cause the damage to the houses, the land, the people. They're the ones that you feel when we have an earthquake. So let's label these on our diagram. I'm going to label those up here, that these are our surface waves. The other type of wave is called a body wave. We call these body waves because if this is the earthquake here, this little red star, then these body waves travel into the earth, into the body of the earth. So they don't travel on the surface, they travel into the body of the earth. So let's label that on our diagram as well, that these are body waves. And we have two different types of body waves. One is called P waves, which actually stands for primary waves. So the P stands for primary. And these are usually the first ones that arrive at a location because they travel pretty quickly. And then the other ones we call S waves, and that stands for secondary waves. And we call them secondary waves because they're the second ones that arrive because they tend to be a little bit slower. So something that might help you to think about these two different major types of waves, the surface waves and the body waves. Again, I always think of this ripple for our surface waves because you see that on the surface of the water, and those are the ones, again, that cause the damage. And then I think of body waves as these invisible waves, the things that you don't really see because they travel deep into the earth, kind of like the electromagnetic spectrum, which is all of the light that we can get. We can see the light, but a lot of the electromagnetic spectrum we can't see, like radio waves, we can't see, microwaves, we can't see. We can see the microwave, but we can't see the waves that are actually cooking our food. So there are a lot of things that we actually can't see on the electromagnetic spectrum, which is very similar to these body waves. So the way that we measure seismic waves is by a couple of different instruments. One is a seismograph, and this is kind of an old school thing. You can actually make these. You take a heavy mass, like a steel ball, for example, and it tends to just kind of stay put. It doesn't move very much, and you suspend it from by a string or a really thin wire from some kind of bar. And then this thing that the bar is attached to, this base, will move back and forth or sideways due to the earthquake. And when this moves, there's this piece of paper right here. And this piece of paper will actually move this direction so that as the earthquake is taking place, the ball will stay put, but the paper and the stand will move around. And at the very base of this little steel or really heavy ball is a tiny little pen, and it will scratch a line on the piece of paper as the earthquake is taking place. Now, if the earthquake isn't moving, you just end up with a nice straight line on the piece of paper because the paper is moving and the ball isn't moving, and you just end up with a straight line. We don't use these seismographs anymore. These are kind of old. Nowadays, we use something called a seismometer. It pretty much does the same thing. Right here is a pen, and so it's still marking on this big roll of paper right here, but it's a little bit more technological. It uses electromagnetic energy to measure the shaking, and it's a lot more sensitive. And so we actually use, scientists, I should say, use these seismometers now instead of a seismograph, but it still does pretty much the same thing. So now you can check your understanding about what a seismograph is. You can also click, there will be a link for a video that will pop up in a little comment. If you don't want to watch that, don't watch that. You can just say okay, and then it'll click you to the question so that you can answer the question. So now that you know what a seismograph is and a seismometer is, on our diagram we should actually label these. So this is where the earthquake took place here. We've been saying that, this little red star or sunburst. And when the earthquake takes place, we have waves, surface waves, that can reach these little blue boxes. These are seismic stations. In other words, these are places where a seismograph is located. And seismic stations are all over the place. So this seismic station can get surface waves when they are created from the earthquake. And then the station over here might get body waves, a P or an S wave that travels through the earth and reaches that location. Be aware too, this seismic station that's closest to the earthquake could also get P and S waves, and it's probably going to get them faster than the station all the way over here, okay? And so we want to make sure that we address this in our notes. In this yellow box that I have underneath the diagram, you have some blank space. So let's capture that information here, that these seismic stations have seismographs that receive seismic waves. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to watch a little demo so that you can see the difference between what P waves and S waves look like. Eventually, we're going to record that information here in our input page, but we're going to wait and do that in class on Wednesday. So while you're watching the demo, you want to observe the S waves, observe the P waves, but don't write anything on your input page yet. And some of the things that you want to look for are, what do they look like? How do they travel? Is one faster than the other one? And then a little box will pop up and you can share your observations in Edpuzzle. The first half of the demo, you're going to see the P wave, and then the second half of the demo, you're going to see the S wave. Great job. We will see you on Wednesday. Make sure you bring your notebook and this page so you can get your stamp.